The letter was waiting for me when I got home from work on a Tuesday evening, stuck to my front door with enough tape to hold a small elephant. I knew immediately it was from the HOA because they used this obnoxious highlighter yellow paper that practically glowed in the twilight. I pulled it down, unlocked my door, and stepped inside my house on Meadowbrook Lane in Henderson, Nevada. The subdivision was called Sunset Ridge Estates, one of those planned communities that sprang up in the early 2000s when Vegas was expanding in every direction. I had bought my 3-bedroom ranch-style house here 6 months ago, and this was the 4th letter I had received from the homeowners association in that short time. The first one complained about my garbage cans being visible from the street on a non-collection day. Never mind that it was collection day and the truck just had not come yet. The second letter took issue with my mailbox needing a fresh coat of paint, which was ridiculous because the paint was fine. The third letter claimed my grass was a 1/4 inch too tall, which I knew was false because I had actually measured it with a ruler out of spite. But this 4th letter, this one made my blood pressure spike the moment I read it. "Dear homeowner," it began, as if they did not know my name despite having it on file. "It has come to the attention of the Sunset Ridge Estates HOA board that you have erected an unpermitted structure on your property that extends beyond your property line and into the common area easement. This flagrant violation of our CC and Artiques, specifically Section 12, Paragraph 4, requires immediate remediation. You have 72 hours to remove the offending structure, or you will be subject to fines of $200 per day until compliance is achieved. Sincerely, Brenda Patterson, HOA President." I read it 3 times, trying to figure out what structure they were talking about. I had not built anything. I had not added a shed, a fence, or even a garden gnome. The only thing I had done in the last month was plant some rose bushes along my back property line, but those were just plants. They could not possibly be talking about rose bushes. I walked through my house and out the back sliding door, stepping onto the small concrete patio. The evening air was still warm, typical for September in Nevada. I looked at my yard, a modest rectangle of grass and desert landscaping. There, along the back edge, were my 8 rose bushes, each one planted carefully in a straight line. I had spent a whole Saturday digging the holes, mixing in fertilizer and making sure they would thrive. My neighbor to the left, an older gentleman named Frank Torres who mostly kept to himself, was grilling on his patio. I waved at him. "Hey Frank, you got any weird letters from the HOA lately?" He flipped a burger and shook his head. "Not this month. Why, what did the harpies want now? They are claiming I built some structure that is not on my property. I cannot figure out what they are talking about." Frank walked over to the fence separating our yards. "You mean those rose bushes?" "Those look fine to me. They are nowhere near the easement." "That is what I thought. Brenda's on a warpath lately," Frank said, lowering his voice even though we were in our own yards. "She went after the Hendersons 2 streets over for having the wrong shade of beige on their shutters. Cost them $3 grand to repaint." I felt my jaw tighten. I had heard stories about nightmare HOAs before buying here, but the real estate agent had assured me that Sunset Ridge was reasonable and fair. That was looking more like a lie every day. The next morning, I took the day off work and drove to the Henderson City Planning Office. If the HOA was going to claim I violated some property line, I needed to know exactly where my property line was. I had the survey from when I bought the house, but it was in a box somewhere in my garage, and I figured getting an official copy would be better anyway. The planning office was in a low concrete building off Galleria Drive, staffed by a tired-looking woman named Susan, who seemed surprised anyone under 60 had walked in. "I need a copy of my property survey," I told her, sliding my driver's license and the property deed across the counter. She typed on her computer for what felt like an eternity. "Meadowbrook Lane, Lot 47. That is the one. Give me about 20 minutes. We have to pull it from the archives." I sat in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs bolted to the floor and scrolled through my phone. I pulled up the Sunset Ridge Estates HOA website, which looked like it had been designed in 2003 and never updated. The board members were listed with their photos. Brenda Patterson stared out from her picture with the kind of smile that did not reach her eyes. She was probably in her mid-50s, with that super short haircut that seemed to be mandatory for HOA presidents. The bio under her photo said she had been on the board for 8 years and president for the last 4. "Mr. Davidson," Susan called out. I walked back to the counter. She had printed out several large sheets of paper showing my property in detail. The survey showed every boundary line, every easement, every measurement down to the inch. "This is the official survey from when your subdivision was platted in 2004, she explained, pointing to the date stamp. "And this is the updated survey from when your specific lot was sold in 2018 to the previous owner. Your survey should match this exactly." I studied the papers carefully. The back property line was clearly marked, running straight across the rear of my lot. There was indeed an easement marked, but it was 3 feet behind my property line, marked as common area drainage easement. So if I planted something on my property, but not in this easement area, that would be fine, right? Susan nodded. "As long as you stay on your side of the property line and out of any easements, you can do what you want." "Well, within city code and your HOA rules, but location-wise, yes. And if someone claimed I was in the easement but I was not, this document would prove it. This is the legal survey on file with the city. It is as official as it gets." I paid $15 for certified copies and left feeling armed for battle. That evening, I decided to measure everything myself. I grabbed a measuring tape from my garage and the survey papers. According to the survey, there should be a property marker at each corner of my lot. I found the back 2 corners after some digging around in the dirt. They were small metal stakes with orange caps, exactly where the survey said they would be. I stretched the measuring tape from the back property markers to where I had planted the rose bushes. 18 inches. My plants were a full 18 inches in front of the property line, which meant they were 21 inches away from where the easement even began. I was not even close to violating anything. I took photos of everything. The property markers, the measuring tape showing the distance, the rose bushes themselves. I documented it all like I was a crime scene investigator. The next day was Thursday, which meant I had less than 48 hours before the HOA deadline. I called the phone number listed on their letter. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. "Sunset Ridge Estates, HOA, this is Brenda." Of course she answered her own phone. "Hi, this is Brandon Davidson on Meadowbrook Lane. I received a violation letter about a structure on my property." "Yes, Mr. Davidson. We conducted our monthly inspection on Monday and noted that you have planted shrubbery that extends into the common area easement. The violation stands." Her tone was clipped, matter of fact, like she was reading a grocery list. "I have not planted anything in the easement," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I have the property survey right here and my plants are well within my property boundaries. Our inspector's report clearly shows a violation. Unless you can provide documentation proving otherwise, the fine schedule will begin on Saturday morning. I have the certified survey from the city planning office. I measured everything myself. My rose bushes are 18 inches from the property line and 21 inches from the easement. There was a pause. Rose bushes? Yes, that is the only thing I have planted recently. 8 rose bushes along my back property line. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear papers shuffling. The violation stands, Mr. Davidson. Present your documentation at the next board meeting if you wish to contest it. When is the next board meeting? The 3rd Tuesday of next month. That is 3 weeks away. You are going to fine me $200 a day for 3 weeks before I can even present my case. That is over $4,000. You can submit a written appeal, but there is no guarantee it will be reviewed before the meeting. Good day, Mr. Davidson. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone, wondering if I had actually just had that conversation. They were going to fine me thousands of dollars for rose bushes that were not even in the wrong place, and they would not even look at my evidence until they had racked up as much money as possible. I called my real estate agent, Monica Reeves, who had sold me the house. Brandon, hi. How's the house? The house is fine. The HOA is insane. They are threatening to fine me $200 a day for rose bushes that are not even in the wrong spot. I explained the whole situation while Monica made sympathetic noises on the other end. Look, I have to be honest with you, she finally said. I've had other clients in Sunset Ridge who have had issues with Brenda. She is very aggressive about enforcement, but if you have the survey showing you are in the right, she will have to back down. She would not even look at it. She told me to wait 3 weeks for the next board meeting. That is ridiculous. You need to go to her house. What? Show up at her house with the survey, make her look at it. She lives in the same subdivision, right? The board members have to live there according to most HOA bylaws. I am not just going to show up at someone's house. Brandon, they are threatening you with thousands of dollars in fines. Sometimes you have to be assertive. Look up her address on the HOA website. Board members have to have their contact information listed. After we hung up, I checked the website. Sure enough, there was an address for Brenda Patterson. 892 Sunset Ridge Boulevard, the main street running through the subdivision. I waited until after dinner, around 7:30, figuring that was a reasonable time for an unannounced visit. I put the survey documents in a folder, grabbed the photos I had printed out, and drove the half-mile to Brenda's house. Her house was one of the larger models in the subdivision, a 2-story with a 3-car garage and elaborate desert landscaping out front. Everything was immaculate. The rocks were arranged in perfect patterns. The cacti stood like sentinels. Even the house numbers on the wall looked like they had been polished recently. I rang the doorbell and waited. Brenda Patterson opened the door wearing an expression that suggested I had just interrupted something very important. She was shorter than I expected, maybe 5'3", and she wore a cream-colored cardigan despite the warm evening. Mrs. Patterson, I am Brandon Davidson. We spoke on the phone earlier about the violation notice. Her expression hardened. Mr. Davidson, this is highly inappropriate. All HOA business should be conducted through proper channels. I tried proper channels. You would not look at my documentation. I am going to be fined starting tomorrow unless I can show you that I am not in violation. The fine schedule is automatic once a violation is confirmed. But there is no violation. I pulled out the survey documents. This is the certified survey from the city planning office. Look, my property line is here, the easement is here, and my rose bushes are here. I am not in the easement. I am not even on the property line. I am 18 inches away from it. She barely glanced at the papers. Our inspector measured differently. Then your inspector is wrong. These are the legal property boundaries on file with the city of Henderson. This is not subjective. Mr. Davidson, I am going to ask you to leave my property now, or I will call the police for harassment. I felt heat rising in my face. Harassment. I am trying to show you proof that your violation notice is false. You are on my doorstep uninvited, raising your voice. That is harassment. A man appeared behind her, tall and balding, wearing golf clothes. Everything okay, honey? This is one of the homeowners. He is just leaving. I am being fined $200 a day starting tomorrow for something I did not do, I said to the husband. I am just trying to show her the proof. The husband looked uncomfortable. Maybe you should look at his papers, Brenda. Stay out of this, Richard. Mr. Davidson, you have 5 seconds to leave or I am calling 911. She was serious. I could see it in her eyes. She would actually call the cops on me for standing on her doorstep with survey documents. Fine, I said. I will see you in court. I walked back to my truck, hands shaking. I had never been the kind of person who got into conflicts. I was a software developer. I solved problems with code, not confrontations. But this was different. This was someone threatening to take thousands of dollars from me for no legitimate reason. That night, I lay awake researching HOA law in Nevada. It turned out that HOAs had broad power, but they also had restrictions. They had to follow their own bylaws. They had to provide due process. They had to act in good faith. What Brenda was doing did not seem like good faith. Friday morning, I contacted an attorney. I found a firm in Las Vegas that specialized in HOA disputes. The lawyer I spoke with, a woman named Patricia Chen, listened to my story and asked me to email her all my documentation. This is pretty straightforward, she said after reviewing everything. You are clearly not in violation based on the survey. The HOA president is required to consider evidence that contradicts an alleged violation. By refusing to even look at your survey and threatening immediate fines, she is not following proper procedure. So what do? We can file an injunction to stop the fines while the dispute is resolved. That will cost you about $2,000 in legal fees upfront. Or you can try one more time to resolve it directly. Send a certified letter to the HOA board with copies of all your documentation and a clear statement that you are not in violation. Send it to every board member, not just Brenda. Sometimes other board members will overrule an overzealous president when they see clear evidence. And if that does not work, then we file the injunction and possibly a lawsuit for harassment. But let us try the letter first. I spent Friday afternoon drafting the letter. I was polite but firm. I laid out the facts. The survey showed my rose bushes were 18 inches from the property line and 21 inches from the easement. I included copies of the certified survey, my measurements, and photographs. I stated clearly that I was not in violation of any HOA rules or property boundaries, and that any fines assessed would be contested in court. I printed 5 copies, one for each board member listed on the HOA website. Besides Brenda, there was a vice president named Donald Marsh, a treasurer named Linda Wu, a secretary named Patricia Holmes, and a member-at-large named George Kimball. I found their addresses on the website and drove to the post office to send everything certified mail with return receipt. It was 4:30 on Friday afternoon when I dropped the letters in the mail. The fines were supposed to start Saturday morning. I had done everything I could. Saturday, I woke up expecting a fight. I checked my mail. I checked my email. Nothing from the HOA. Maybe the letters had done their job. Maybe one of the other board members had intervened. Sunday was quiet too. I spent the day working in my yard, half expecting Brenda to drive by and scowl at me, but the street stayed peaceful. Monday morning, I had just poured my coffee when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man in his 60s wearing khakis and a golf shirt with the Sunset Ridge logo embroidered on it. Brandon Davidson. Yes, I am George Kimball from the HOA board. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I invited him in. He had kind eyes and an apologetic demeanor. I got your letter on Saturday, he began, sitting at my kitchen table. I looked at the survey documents you sent. I also went and looked at your rose bushes. You are absolutely right. You are nowhere near the easement. Relief washed through me. So the fines will be dropped. I brought it up with Brenda yesterday. She is not backing down. She claims our inspector's report is correct and that the city survey must be outdated. Outdated? Property lines do not just move. I know. I tried to tell her that. So did Linda, the treasurer. But Brenda has been steamrolling the board for years. She threatens to make things difficult if we do not go along with her decisions. What does that mean? George sighed. She controls the meeting agendas. She controls what gets discussed and what does not. If you cross her, suddenly your neighborhood concerns never make it onto the agenda. Your street does not get its potholes fixed. Your amenity requests get denied. She runs the HOA like her personal kingdom. That is not legal, is it? It is legal enough if no one challenges her. Most people just pay the fines and move on because fighting costs more than complying. I am not paying for a violation I did not commit. Good. You should not. Look, I am going to be honest with you. I have been on this board for 3 years and I am tired of how Brenda operates. If you fight this and win, it might create an opening to remove her from the board. But you need to know she is going to make this ugly. She does not lose gracefully. We talked for another 20 minutes. George gave me insights into how the board operated, who the other members were, and what my options looked like. The picture he painted was of a woman who had turned the HOA into her personal fiefdom and intimidated everyone into going along with it. After George left, I called Patricia Chen, the attorney. They are not backing down, I told her. We need to file that injunction. I will have the paperwork ready by this afternoon. We will file first thing Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning. Patricia filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction in Clark County District Court. The motion requested that the HOA be barred from assessing or collecting any fines related to the alleged violation until the court could review the evidence. The hearing was set for Friday morning, which meant 4 days of waiting. The HOA had already technically started their fine schedule, so they were claiming I owed $800 by the time we went to court. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. Is this Brandon Davidson? A woman's voice, older, shaky. Yes, this is Linda Wu. I am the treasurer for the Sunset Ridge HOA. I need to talk to you about something, but not on this call. Can you meet me somewhere outside the subdivision? We agreed to meet at a coffee shop on Stephanie Street, a few miles away from Sunset Ridge. I got there first and ordered a coffee, sitting at a corner table where we would have some privacy. Linda Wu arrived 10 minutes later. She was a small Asian woman, probably in her late 60s, and she looked nervous. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting down with her tea. "I need to show you something, but you have to promise me you will not tell Brenda or anyone else on the board that I was the one who gave this to you." "Okay," I said slowly. She pulled out a manila folder from her purse. "I have been the treasurer for 6 years. Part of my job is tracking all the violations and fines the HOA assesses. About 2 years ago, I started noticing something odd. Brenda was issuing more violations than usual, and they were all borderline or questionable. People were paying the fines rather than fighting them because it was easier." She opened the folder and showed me spreadsheets. In the last 2 years, The HOA has collected over $200,000 in violation fines. That is compared to maybe $30,000 in the years before Brenda became president. The money goes into the general fund, which Brenda has discretion over for certain expenses. What kind of expenses? That is the thing. I started looking at the expenses more carefully. There are charges for an inspector who supposedly does the monthly property reviews. We pay this inspector $3,000 a month, but I have never met this inspector. I do not know who they are. When I asked Brenda for their contact information, she said it was handled through a contractor she hired. I was starting to see where this was going. You think the inspector is fake? I think Brenda is issuing violations based on her own observations, creating an inspector out of thin air, and then paying herself the inspector fees through some shell company. It is fraud. Have you gone to the police? I do not have enough proof. I have these spreadsheets, but I do not have access to the contractor information. Brenda keeps that locked down, and if I am wrong, I could be sued for defamation. But if you are already fighting her in court, maybe your attorney can subpoena the records. She slid the folder across to me. This is a copy. Everything is documented. Transaction dates, amounts, the violation cases. If there is fraud happening, it is all in here. After Linda left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour going through the documents. The pattern was clear. Before Brenda became president, the HOA issued maybe 2 or 3 violation notices a month, usually for legitimate things like abandoned cars or seriously overgrown yards. After Brenda took over, violations jumped to 15 or 20 a month. Grass too long. Wrong paint colors. Decorations not approved. Vehicles parked slightly wrong. Every violation came with fines, and every fine went into the general fund. And every month, like clockwork, there was a payment to Summit Property Inspections LLC for $3,000. I called Patricia Chen immediately. "This changes things," she said after I explained what Linda had given me. "If the HOA president is creating false violations to generate revenue that she is then embezzling, that is criminal fraud. We need to bring this to the district attorney's office." But Linda said she does not have enough proof. She does not, but we can get it. In our court case, we can request financial discovery. We can subpoena the HOA's banking records, their contractor agreements, everything. If this Summit Property Inspections does not exist or is owned by Brenda or her family, it will come out. Friday morning arrived, and I put on my one good suit for the court hearing. Patricia met me outside the Clark County Courthouse, a modern building in downtown Las Vegas. She looked confident in her navy suit and heels, carrying a leather briefcase. "The HOA will probably send their attorney," she explained as we went through security. "It will be quick. We present our case for the injunction, they present theirs, and the judge decides." With the survey documents, this should be straightforward. We entered the courtroom, a wood-paneled room that smelled like old books and air conditioning. On the other side sat a man in an expensive suit, presumably the HOA's attorney, and next to him was Brenda Patterson. She wore a burgundy blazer and had her hair done up. She did not look at me. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Martinez, called our case. We approached the bench, and Patricia laid out our argument. I had planted rose bushes on my property, well within the legal boundaries. The HOA claimed I had violated the easement, but the certified survey proved otherwise. The HOA was threatening $200 a day in fines for a violation that did not exist. Patricia showed the judge the survey, my measurements, and my photographs. The HOA's attorney, a slick-looking man named Jeffrey Morrison, argued that the HOA had a right to enforce its rules and that their inspector had determined a violation existed. He claimed that property surveys could be interpreted differently, and that the HOA's interpretation was reasonable. Judge Martinez looked at the survey documents for a long time. Then she looked at the HOA attorney. "Counselor, are you seriously arguing that a certified property survey filed with the city can be interpreted differently? Property lines are property lines." "Your Honor, the HOA's concern is about the placement relative to the drainage easement, which may have shifted over time due to erosion or landscaping changes. Has the easement been legally moved?" "Not to my knowledge, Your Honor." "Then it is where the survey says it is." Judge Martinez turned to Patricia. "Your motion for a preliminary injunction is granted. The Sunset Ridge Estates, HOA, is hereby prohibited from assessing, collecting, or threatening to collect any fines related to this alleged violation, unless and until they can provide evidence that the plaintiff's rose bushes are actually in violation of the property boundaries or easement. Additionally, any fines already assessed are voided." She banged her gavel. The whole thing had taken maybe 15 minutes. As we walked out of the courtroom, Brenda stopped me in the hallway. Her face was red, her eyes furious. "You have made a terrible mistake," she said. "You just made an enemy of the entire HOA board." "I think I just made an enemy of you," I replied. "The board members I have talked to seem reasonable." "We'll see how reasonable they are when your street needs repairs and your concerns get ignored. You are going to regret this." Patricia stepped between us. "Mrs. Patterson, you are dangerously close to making threats that could be considered harassment. I suggest you walk away." Brenda glared at both of us, then turned and clicked away in her heels, her attorney hurrying to catch up. "That went well," I said. Patricia smiled. "Better than well. Judges do not like it when HOAs overstep. Now let us talk about the next phase." We went to a nearby diner and Patricia laid out the strategy. The injunction protected me from the immediate fines, but it did not address the larger issues. If we wanted to expose the potential fraud, we needed to expand the case. She would file additional motions requesting financial discovery from the HOA. We would subpoena their banking records, contractor agreements, and all documentation related to Summit property inspections. "This is going to take months," she warned, "and it is going to cost you more in legal fees. But if we can prove fraud, you could potentially sue for damages, and the HOA could be forced to reimburse all the homeowners who paid questionable fines." "Do it," I said. "If Brenda is stealing from everyone, she needs to be stopped." The next week passed quietly. I went to work, came home, watered my rose bushes out of spite, and waited. Patricia filed the discovery motions. The HOA had 30 days to respond. Then things started getting weird. I came home one evening to find a violation notice on my door. This time, they claimed my house number was not properly visible from the street. I looked at my house numbers. They were fine black metal numbers on a white background, clearly visible, exactly like every other house on my street. I documented it with photos and sent them to Patricia. 3 days later, another violation notice. My trash cans were visible from the street. I checked the date and time stamp they claimed to have observed the violation. It was a Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. I had been at work. My trash cans were in my garage. Someone was lying. Then a notice claiming I had weeds in my gravel landscaping. I did not have weeds. I had been meticulous about my landscaping specifically to avoid giving them ammunition. "She is harassing you," Patricia said when I called her about the 4th bogus violation in 2 weeks. "Document everything. Take photos with timestamps. This actually helps our case. It shows a pattern of retaliatory behavior." But it was wearing on me. Every day, I worried about coming home to another yellow notice. I started taking photos of my entire property every morning before work, just to have proof of its condition. Other homeowners started approaching me. Frank, my neighbor, mentioned that he had gotten a violation for his mailbox being slightly tilted. A woman 3 houses down said she was fined for having a crack in her driveway that had been there for years. A couple on the next street over told me they were being cited for their tree branches extending over the sidewalk, even though the tree was planted by the HOA's landscaping company years ago. "It is like she is going after everyone who lives near you," Frank said one evening while we stood in my driveway. "Like she is trying to turn the neighborhood against you. Or she is trying to make it look like she is enforcing rules equally, so it does not look like retaliation," I said. A month after the court hearing, Patricia got the first batch of discovery documents from the HOA. Their attorney had fought it, but the judge ordered them to comply. We sat in Patricia's office in Las Vegas, going through boxes of financial records. "Here," Patricia said, pulling out a sheaf of papers. "Summit Property Inspections, registered in Nevada in 2020. Owner is Richard Patterson. That is Brenda's husband. Yep, and look at the business address. It is a UPS store mailbox in Henderson. This is a shell company. He registered it, probably does nothing with it, and the HOA pays it $3,000 a month for inspection services that Brenda herself is performing." We kept digging. The more we found, the worse it got. Summit Property Inspections had received over $70,000 in the last 2 years from the HOA. There was no evidence the company had any employees, any equipment, any insurance, or any legitimate business operations. It existed only to receive checks from the HOA. "This is embezzlement," Patricia said. "Clear cut. We need to take this to the district attorney." We compiled everything into a report and delivered it to the Clark County District Attorney's office. They assigned it to a prosecutor named Daniel Reeves who specialized in white-collar crime. He called me 2 days later. "Mr. Davidson, I have reviewed the materials you and your attorney provided. I agree this warrants investigation. We are going to open a case. I need to warn you, this could take several months to build properly. Financial crimes require thorough documentation. But based on what I see here, I think we have enough for probable cause." While the DA's office investigated, life in Sunset Ridge got even stranger. More homeowners were receiving violation notices. The Facebook group for the subdivision, which I had joined when I moved in, became a constant stream of complaints. People were angry, confused, and starting to connect the dots. Someone created a petition to recall Brenda from the board. It needed signatures from 20% of the homeowners to trigger a special election. Within 2 weeks, they had 30%. The recall election was scheduled for December. Brenda fought back. She sent out a newsletter to all homeowners claiming that a small group of troublemakers were trying to undermine the HOA's ability to maintain property values. She never mentioned me by name, but everyone knew who she meant. The newsletter painted her as a dedicated volunteer being attacked by ungrateful residents who did not appreciate all her hard work. Some people bought it. There were homeowners who thought Brenda was doing a great job, who wanted strict enforcement of every rule, who believed that property values depended on everyone's grass being exactly the same height. But more people were tired of the constant violations, the arbitrary enforcement, and the feeling that the HOA existed to punish them rather than help them. The recall election became a referendum on Brenda's leadership. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation continued. I gave a statement to the DA's office. Linda Wu gave a statement, no longer afraid because she was protected as a whistleblower. George Kimball gave a statement. Even some homeowners who had paid questionable fines came forward to tell their stories. In early November, 2 months after my original court hearing, the DA's office executed a search warrant on Brenda Patterson's home. I heard about it from Frank, who heard about it from someone else. By the time I drove past her house that evening, the street was full of cars from people wanting to see the spectacle. The police had spent hours inside, according to the neighbors. They had carried out boxes of documents, computers, even Brenda's phone. Richard Patterson had stood in the driveway looking shell-shocked while his wife yelled at the officers about harassment and false accusations. That night, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find George Kimball and Donald Marsh, the board vice president, standing on my porch. "Can we come in?" George asked. I made coffee while they sat at my kitchen table, both looking exhausted. "The board is in chaos," Donald said. He was a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses. "Brenda is suspended pending the criminal investigation. Linda Wu is serving as acting president. We are trying to sort through years of financial irregularities." "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad. Beyond the Summit property inspections fraud, there are questions about other expenses, landscaping contracts that seem inflated, repair work that was billed but maybe never done. It is going to take an independent audit to figure out the full scope." "Why are you telling me this?" George leaned forward. "Because you started this. You could have just paid the $200 fine and moved on. Most people would have. But you fought, and in fighting, you exposed something that needed to be exposed. The HOA owes you an apology." "The HOA owes everyone an apology," I said. "How many people paid bogus fines over the years? We are working on that. Linda is going through the records. Anyone who can show they paid a fine for a questionable violation in the last 2 years will be refunded. It is the least we can do." They left after an hour, and I sat in my quiet house feeling strange. I had never wanted to be the center of drama. I just wanted to plant some rose bushes and live my life. But sometimes standing up for yourself meant standing up for everyone. The recall election happened in mid-December on a Tuesday evening at the subdivision clubhouse. Nearly 300 homeowners showed up, far more than had ever attended a regular HOA meeting. The tiny clubhouse was packed, people spilling out onto the patio outside. Brenda stood at the front, defiant, flanked by her attorney. She gave a speech about her years of service, her dedication to the community, and the false accusations being made against her. She claimed the criminal investigation was politically motivated, that her husband's company was legitimate, and that she was being persecuted for doing her job. Some people clapped, most did not. Then George Kimball spoke, laying out the facts calmly and clearly. The financial irregularities, the fake inspection company, the pattern of questionable violations. He did not editorialize or attack Brenda personally. He just presented the evidence. The vote was not even close. 73% voted to remove Brenda from the board immediately. She did not take it well. She stood up, grabbed the microphone from George, and started shouting about lawsuits and defamation, and how everyone would regret this. It took her attorney and husband physically guiding her out of the clubhouse to end the scene. After she left, the meeting continued. Linda Wu was officially elected as president. They voted to hire an independent auditor to review all HOA finances for the past 5 years. They voted to suspend all violation enforcement until new fair procedures could be established. They voted to refund any questionable fines from the past 2 years. It felt like the whole community could finally exhale. 2 weeks later, just before Christmas, the district attorney filed formal charges against Brenda Patterson and her husband Richard. Multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, and theft. The amounts were staggering. Over $70,000 from the fake inspection company, plus another $40,000 in inflated landscaping contracts, where Richard's company had billed the HOA for work that was never done. They both pled not guilty and were released on bail, but the evidence was overwhelming. The DA had their financial records, testimony from multiple witnesses, and the paper trail of fake invoices and shell companies. The trial was scheduled for the following April. Life in Sunset Ridge started to normalize. The new board under Linda's leadership was transparent and reasonable. They sent out a newsletter explaining everything that had happened, apologizing to the community and outlining steps to prevent future abuse. They established a clear violation appeals process. They hired a legitimate property inspection company with proper credentials and insurance. I got a check in the mail for $800, reimbursement for the fines that had been assessed before the judge stopped them. Several other homeowners got much larger checks, refunds for years of questionable violations. My rose bushes bloomed in March, right on schedule. They were beautiful. 8 bushes full of red and pink flowers along my back fence, exactly 18 inches from the property line where they belonged. The trial started on a Monday in April. I took the day off work to attend. The courtroom was packed with Sunset Ridge residents, all of us wanting to see justice done. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. They showed the financial records, the fake company registrations, the pattern of violations designed to generate revenue. They called Linda Wu to testify about the financial irregularities she had discovered. They called me to testify about my experience with the bogus violation and Brenda's refusal to consider evidence. The defense tried to argue that Brenda had been serving the community, that the inspection company was legitimate, that any financial irregularities were mistakes rather than intentional fraud. But it fell apart under cross-examination. Richard Patterson admitted under oath that Summit Property Inspections had never actually conducted any property inspections. He claimed he had just filed the paperwork as a favor to his wife and did not know she was billing the HOA through the company. Nobody believed him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Brenda sobbed as the verdict was read. Richard just stared straight ahead, his face blank. Sentencing came 2 months later. Brenda got 18 months in prison plus 5 years probation and was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Richard got 12 months in prison and probation based on his lesser role in the scheme. The day after sentencing, I was working in my front yard when Frank came over. "Did you ever think it would go this far?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "I just wanted to plant some rose bushes. Those rose bushes cost Brenda Patterson her freedom. Those rose bushes exposed what she was doing. She did this to herself." We stood there in the afternoon sun, looking at the quiet street lined with identical houses. Sunset Ridge looked peaceful now. The constant tension that had hung over the neighborhood for years was gone. "The new board is talking about planting more flowers along the common areas," Frank said. "Making the place look nice instead of just enforcing rules. Weird concept, right?" I laughed. "Revolutionary." That evening, I got a call from Patricia Chen. "I wanted to let you know the HOA has agreed to pay your legal fees as part of their settlement obligations," she said. "All $23,000. You will not owe anything out of pocket." That is good news. It is more than that. What you did, standing up to an abusive HOA president, it matters. I have had 4 new clients contact me in the past month, all with similar HOA horror stories. People are tired of being pushed around by petty tyrants on power trips. After we hung up, I walked out to my back patio and looked at my rose bushes in the fading light. They had grown fuller, healthier, spreading out along that back fence. In the fall, I planned to add some lavender between them, maybe some sage. I owned this property. It was mine, and no one was going to tell me I could not make it beautiful. The following week, the Sunset Ridge Estates HOA held their first meeting under the new board leadership. I attended, along with about 50 other homeowners. The atmosphere was completely different from the recall meeting. People were relaxed, friendly, actually interested in participating. Linda Wu presented the findings from the independent audit. Beyond what Brenda and Richard had been convicted for, the auditors had found evidence of other financial mismanagement. Money had been spent on things that did not benefit the community. Contracts had been awarded to friends and family members without proper bidding processes. It was not all criminal, but it was all wrong. We are instituting new financial controls, Linda explained. Multiple signatures required on checks over $500, quarterly financial reports available to all homeowners, competitive bidding on all contracts over $2,000, and most importantly, term limits on board positions. No one can be president for more than 4 consecutive years. People applauded. The meeting continued with actual community business, street repairs that were needed, plans for updating the playground equipment, a discussion about adding more walking paths through the common areas. It was boring in the best possible way, an HOA actually serving its community instead of terrorizing it. After the meeting, several people came up to thank me. Some were homeowners who had gotten refund checks. Others were just grateful that someone had finally stood up to Brenda. I felt awkward with the attention. I had not done anything heroic. I had just refused to be bullied. George Kimball pulled me aside as people were leaving. The board wants to offer you something. We would like you to consider joining as a member at large. We need people who will ask questions and stand up for what is right. I do not know anything about running an HOA. Neither did most of us when we started. You will learn. Think about it. I did think about it over several days. Part of me wanted nothing to do with HOA politics after everything that had happened. But another part recognized that communities needed people willing to serve, to do the boring work of keeping things running fairly. I accepted the position in May. My first board meeting was awkward and tedious, full of discussions about water pressure issues and gate maintenance schedules. But it was also satisfying in a strange way, being part of something that actually helped people instead of punishing them. Summer came to Henderson, bringing the brutal heat that made you appreciate air conditioning like a religion. My rose bushes went dormant in the worst of it, but they had established strong root systems. They would come back even better next spring. One evening in July, I was watering my front landscaping when a moving truck pulled up 3 houses down. A young couple got out, probably in their late 20s, looking excited and nervous about their first home purchase. I walked over and introduced myself. Their names were Chris and Jen Martin. They seemed nice, a little overwhelmed by everything. "How is the HOA here?" Chris asked. The real estate agent said it was pretty reasonable. I smiled. "It is now. It was not always, but we had some changes. If you ever have issues, come talk to me. I am on the board. We try to be fair." That is good to hear. We were worried because we have heard horror stories. There are definitely horror stories out there, I agreed. But most problems can be solved if people communicate and act reasonably, and if they do not, you fight. You stand up for yourself. They moved in over the following week, and Sunset Ridge kept turning. More new families arrived. Some older residents moved away. The community evolved, as communities do, but with better leadership and better systems to prevent abuse. In September, almost exactly a year after I had received that first violation notice about my rose bushes, the HOA held an election to fill several expiring board positions. The turnout was higher than it had ever been. People actually cared now about who was running their HOA. All the candidates ran on platforms of transparency and fairness. No one promised strict enforcement or threatened property values. The tone had completely shifted. I stood in my backyard after the election results came in, looking at those rose bushes that had started everything. They were blooming again, full of flowers in the cooler September weather. 18 inches from the property line, 21 inches from the easement, exactly where they were supposed to be. My phone rang. It was Patricia Chen. "I wanted to let you know that Richard Patterson was released on good behavior after serving 8 months. Brenda is still inside, but she will be eligible for early release in a few more months. How do you feel about that?" Justice was served. They were convicted. They are paying restitution. Prison is not really about revenge. No, I suppose not. After we hung up, I thought about Brenda, sitting in a cell somewhere, probably still believing she had done nothing wrong. Some people never learned. They went through life thinking the rules did not apply to them, that they could bully and steal and intimidate without consequences. Until someone said no. Until someone stood up with a property survey and refused to be pushed around. I spent the rest of the evening in my backyard, enjoying the cooling air as the sun set over the mountains. Frank came out on his patio and we talked about nothing important. The weather, football, whether we should organize a neighborhood barbecue now that people actually liked each other. Life in Sunset Ridge Estates was good. Not perfect, but good. The HOA served its purpose without overreaching. The community felt like a community instead of a police state. And my rose bushes bloomed beautifully, standing as a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance led to the biggest changes. I never regretted planting those roses, not when the violation notice arrived, not when Brenda threatened me, not through the court hearings or the investigations or any of it, because they were not just flowers, they were a line in the sand. They were me saying I belonged here on my property and I would not be intimidated. And in the end, that simple refusal to be bullied brought down a corrupt HOA president, exposed years of fraud, and gave a whole community back its peace of mind. All because I showed them my property survey.